Great. So are we all set and ready?
I believe we are. Let me just start by saying it's an honor again to have you here with us a third time. And I would like to personally thank you for the time set aside to do these sorts of speakings.
It is absolutely my pleasure. It's truly my pleasure to be here with all of you, and I'm very much looking forward to this. So thank you.
Thank you. If you would like, with your permission, of course, we can just jump into the questions.
Yes, that would be wonderful, please. And then maybe toward the end, let's just leave a little bit of time because I just wanted to say something in conclusion. So maybe a little bit before noon Central Time, maybe we can just leave a little bit of time so I can do that.
Excellent. I will make sure to do so.
Otherwise, let's jump right into it, please.
Okay. Do we know if there was a conception of Godhead within the European faiths akin to the worship of Bhagavan Sri Krishna?
Oh, that's a very deep question, actually. That's a very deep question, a very good question, actually. Interestingly, no one has ever asked me that in many decades that I've been teaching. And let me try to answer that as succinctly as I can, but at the same time with accuracy. The, let's say, overall answer to that is yes, but at the same time, it also is dependent upon with how much specificity one is speaking. So in other words, is it the case that, for example, let's say if you went back to Sweden 2,000 years ago, you would have a temple somewhere in Sweden where they would be worshipping literally murtis of Sri Radha Krishna? Probably not. To be very honest about that, probably not. But at the same time, conceptually, as far as having, let's say, a theistic, even somewhat Vaishnava understanding of the nature of the divine, yes, we've actually seen that in many of the pre-Christian European cultures. Yes, they absolutely did have that. Of course, as I say that, I have to give the caveat that we have very little of the literature. The only serious literature that we have is Greco-Roman, of course. You know, as far as, let's say, Slavic paganism, Celtic, Nordic, etc., there's almost no literature. Certainly nothing philosophical. That's certainly the case. But when it comes to at least Greco-Roman, which is, again, pretty much the only serious philosophical writing we have, yes, there certainly were theistic understandings of God. The greatest example that I can think of, two of them actually, and in this order, are first Plotinus and then Plato. And in that order, actually, I feel that Plotinus was much more direct as far as his understanding of the nature of God. That is, God, first of all, there being a God, a supreme God. And you see, this opens up an entirely new can of worms. Of course, many people claim that paganism is polytheistic, but then for that matter, they also make the false claim that Sanatana Dharma is polytheistic. Of course, neither is the case. All of the Dharmic religions believed that ultimately there was one supreme being, but they also worshipped various demigods, various nature spirits, personifications of the elements, demigods, solar deities, etc. So this is what makes it confusing for people. You know, they'll claim that, oh yes, you know, the original Nordic pagans were quote-unquote polytheistic, or these people or those people were polytheistic because they see evidence of the worship of many different beings. But then, again, you also see that in Vedic spirituality, where, of course, they worship many different beings. They worship Indra, Varuna, Surya, Chandra, etc., many gods, many goddesses. But from the Vedic perspective, of course, we understand that Vedic spirituality is monotheistic, but also with the worship of other powerful beings who are never confused to be God. Well, one could very easily say that this is the case for really all Dharmic religions. And we see evidence of this in many places, among the ancient Persians, among Taoists, just so many different cultures where, yes, they worshipped a pantheon of gods, but ultimately there was one supreme being. Well, again, getting back to Europe, the only written evidence that still truly survives is, again, Greco-Roman. And what we've seen is that the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans, too, worshiped their pantheons, but they also understood that, yes, ultimately there's one supreme being. Plato wrote about this extensively, in all of his many, many dialogues. He wrote about this. Again, Plotinus wrote about this. Aristotle very much wrote about this, even though he himself was not really a very spiritual person or philosopher. And if anything, that's even further evidence with Aristotle. Aristotle was not mystically oriented, for lack of a better term. He really wasn't. He was more of a scientist. But even Aristotle talks about there being one supreme being. In fact, he gives evidences of the existence of God. So yes, when it comes to at least the belief in a supreme God, all of the ancient European religions believed this. Again, for those religions for whom we don't have direct evidence, well, it can be implied, because this is the nature of all the pre-Abrahamic religions. That's number one. Number two, what is the nature of that God? There is pretty much agreement among most, if not all, of the Dharmic religions as far as what is the nature of God. And to state it again very philosophically and generally, their view is the Vedantic view. That is that Janmadyasya Yataha, that God is the source of all things, both spiritual and material. That God is that being than which nothing greater exists. That God is the possessor of an infinite number of auspicious attributes, and I can go on and on. There was agreement among all the ancient religions that this was the nature of God. Now again, to get very specific, as far as whether these ancient religions recognized Krishna or Narayana as the supreme being, that's a little bit more tricky. I personally would say that they did, but not necessarily under those names. You see, because this is where people get tripped up. While there is a continuity of understanding of Dharma among all the ancient cultures of the world, they did indeed all have their own languages, their own cultures, their own cultural understandings, their own ways of communicating, etc. So this is what confuses people sometimes. But the truth of the matter is, yes, there was general agreement. Again, they would not necessarily, if you went to ancient Germany, 2,000 years ago, if you went to ancient Britain, 2,500 years ago, and if you asked them, what is the name of God? They would not say Krishna. They wouldn't use that name because that was not in their language. But if you asked them, what is the nature of the God that you believe in? They would describe very much, at least philosophically, they would describe Krishna. Again, they wouldn't necessarily describe God as, yes, God is Shama, he is of the color of a rain-filled cloud, and he plays a flute, etc. Not necessarily would they say that, but at least philosophically, they would describe Krishna as we understand him. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I'm very happy to hear that we're the first people to ask that question, for whatever that matters.
Well, you're a very special group, actually, in many ways, and your understanding is quite advanced, quite good. So I'm not surprised that you're asking me some questions I've never gotten before. So that's very good.
So the next question would be: you talk about Patanjali Ashtanga Yoga in some of your videos. Is this the best path of yoga to pursue? Do you recommend Ashtanga Yoga to everybody, whether Vaishnavas or not? Which yoga should we start with?
Very important question. Very important question. And again, this question also requires a little bit of in-depth explanation. The overall answer is yes. The Ashtanga system of Patanjali is the yoga system. Now, having said that, I need to explain that almost no one who most people have access to today teaches the pure Ashtanga system. I'm one of the few, and I teach it to very few people. I have certified and taught this to several people very quietly. And let me explain exactly what the Ashtanga system really is, because you can read all the books you want, listen to lectures about the Ashtanga system, but you're not going to get the full background and information as far as what this system is. First of all, it starts with the person. This is the Patanjali, named after Patanjali, the Patanjali Yoga system, the eightfold system. Well, first it starts with the person. Who is Patanjali? Patanjali certainly was a sage. He was a rishi in the full sense of that term. But more than this, he himself was not only a Vaishnava, and this is very, very much known. He was not only a Vaishnava, but he was the incarnation, the avatara of Anantashesha. He was quite literally the personification of God's power of infinity. That's what Anantashesha is. He is one of God's Shaktis, and he represents infinity itself. So this is who Patanjali is, and that's very much well known. I mean, that's something that anyone can just look up, that he is considered to be the incarnation of Anantashesha. But this is also, again, what is of importance, is that he himself was a Vaishnava, and his goal was to help people to know themselves perfectly, self-realization, Atma-jnana, but also ultimately to know God. So this is why in his Yoga Sutras, which he is most well known for, and that's not the only book he's written actually. He's written several books, including a book on Sanskrit grammar. I believe one on Ayurveda. It was either him or Vyasa, I forget, but I think it was Patanjali who wrote a book on Ayurveda. So he's written several books. But as far as the Yoga Sutras, now I also have to explain this. The yoga system itself is a twofold process. There's a twofold process that's involved. The first goal, one could say, is indeed Atma-jnana, self-realization. The second goal, on the other hand, is Brahma Vidya, that is God consciousness. These are the twofold goals of yoga. So this alone is something that almost everyone misses. Very few people are aware of this. They'll even conflate the two and make the horrible mistake of thinking that self-realization and God-realization, same thing. Of course, that's a Mayavadi and New Age idea. Self-realization and God-realization are not the same. Our self is not God. Our self is Atman, not Paramatman. So this is why there's a twofold system. So first self-realization, then God-realization, and in that order. The reason why is, how can you know God if you don't even know yourself? Very simply. If you think that, first I'll have God-realization and then eventually I'll know who I am, well, that's silly. That would be similar to a person without a brain hoping to get a PhD. First you know yourself, first you know the knower, then you know God. Now, with all that as a background, now we can understand the purpose of the Yoga Sutras very specifically. Because for anyone who's read the Yoga Sutras, you'll see that, Patanjali does mention in a few places, and very importantly, that, knowing God is the most important thing. Devotion to God, Ishvara Pranidhana, he says. That is, devotion to God is something that is crucial. But he doesn't really go very deeply into God, into the nature of God, into knowing God. Instead, he focuses on the first aspect, on Atma-jnana, self-realization. So all throughout the Yoga Sutras, this is what he emphasizes. Now, why is this the case? Well, very simply, that was his goal with the book. Anyone who's written a book, and I've written a dozen of them, anybody who's written a book, anybody who's read a book, understands that the author has a goal with that book. It's not that, with this, 200-page book, I'm going to discuss every idea that I've ever had and everything of importance in the entire cosmos and jam it all in one book. No. You have a book, it has a thesis, it has a goal. It's going to talk about X thing, that's what the book focuses on. So, in the same way, the Vedic authors did the same thing. So you have the Nyaya Sutras, the sutras on logic and epistemology. Well, that's what that book focuses on. You have, let me not go on because I'm going to talk about this in a moment, but you get the idea. Now with Patanjali, He focuses on Atma Jnana, knowing oneself. And that is the goal of following the Yoga Sutras. Now, the Yoga Sutras and the Ashtanga system are not synonymous because the Ashtanga system itself does not focus only on self-realization. It also focuses in practice on God realization as well. So now let's talk about the Ashtanga system itself and not just the Yoga Sutras. With the Ashtanga system, to explain what the Ashtanga system looks like in its purest form, the way it was practiced thousands of years ago during Vedic times and Upanishadic times. Basically, and let me just paint a picture first and then I'll go in depth. If in your minds as Vaishnavas, you could imagine a Vaishnava, let's say a pure devotee, who also was an absolute perfected yogi in every way. And that means as far as asanas, as far as pranayama, as far as all of the different aspects of yoga. So if you can imagine a perfect, pure devotee, someone who knows Krishna and has absolute devotion to Krishna, but who is also a perfected yogi. That is what the perfect yogi of the Ashtanga system looks like. So, with that as a beginning, just a little bit more in depth. The full Ashtanga system, the full system, is found not in the Yoga Sutras, because again, the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali had a goal. Let me teach these people self-realization. The full Ashtanga system is found in the Upanishads. That's where it's found. And in the Upanishads, it's interesting, what it is often called is upasana. Not vipassana, that's a Buddhist term, but with a U, upasana. This is what the full Ashtanga system is called throughout the Upanishads. And what the full Ashtanga system is to give it in the slightest nutshell, it is the full eightfold system permeated with bhakti. Permeated with bhakti, with every single yogic practice done with the goal of worshiping, knowing, and having devotion, pure, perfect devotion, as a perfect vehicle, having perfected ourselves yogically in devotion to Krishna. That is the actual Ashtanga system. It's called Upasana all throughout the Upanishads, and it's in the Upanishads that you find this full Ashtanga system. Now, as Vaishnavas, and this makes me different from ISKCON people. ISKCON people, some of them today do a lot of yoga actually. They even teach yoga, they practice yoga, but that's very recent. A lot of the more fanatical ISKCON people will say to you, no, yoga, it's Mayavadi, it's nothing, it's of no importance, we're not meant to do yoga in this age, just chant Hare Krishna, etc. And philosophically, they're not 100% wrong, but at the same time, yoga is our heritage. Yoga is our heritage, it's our spiritual heritage, it is Vedic. And Patanjali, who is Ananta Shesha, did not come to earth to teach this for nothing. Nothing is extraneous in the Vedic literature. So, yes, we're meant to practice yoga. And let me tell you, for myself as a radically orthodox and traditionalist Vedic Vaishnava, and I have to emphasize this, Vedic Vaishnava. And when I say by Vedic, everyone throws that word around. Oh, this is Vedic, that's Vedic. Oh, a book written by my guru 5 years ago. Oh, that's Vedic. No, that's not what Vedic means. Vedic means it originates from Shruti literature. What Vedic means is that it is as orthodox as anything can be. So with all that understood, for myself as a Vedic Vaishnava, as orthodox as a person can be, I teach my people yoga, but I teach them Vaishnava yoga. I teach them the yoga of Patanjali as taught in the Upanishads, with the goal of perfecting our vehicle, perfecting our bodies, our minds, our ethics, our emotions, our nervous system in such a way that we can serve Krishna in absolute perfection. That is what it means to be a Vaishnava yogi. And I'm sorry for the long answer. Actually, let me tell you, this was the short answer. I could have gone much more in depth. This was my attempt to be very brief. But yes, when it comes to yoga, there's much to be known, and it's not something simply meant, quote unquote, for Mayavadis. No, there's nothing Mayavadi about the original yoga system. All of the great rishis, including the people who revealed the Srimad Bhagavatam. Vyasa was a yogi. They were all yogis. So we have to take a clue from that all the great Vaishnava rishis, forget about gurus, forget about acharyas, the people who revealed our scriptures themselves, they were yogis. And I'm a yogi. And we are all meant to be true yogis. Again, God knows not what's meant by yogis today, not in your yoga pants with your little yoga mat flung under your arm, going to some yoga studio to get sweaty. God knows we're not talking about that. But for that matter, we're not even talking about some sort of Mayavadi yoga. No, we're talking about Vaishnava yoga. We're meant to be Vaishnava yogis. So I'll end there.
Thank you for the brief nutshell on that one. We understand that these topics take a lot of in-depth knowledge, and so we respect your ability to distill this much information in these few words.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
But that actually leads us into the next question of where can people like us in our local areas, or can we even find authentic teachers for this sort of yoga as opposed to modern New Age corruption?
I mean, to be completely honest about it, you can find some very nice yoga teachers, some very good people, some spiritual people who are quite good. As far as this perfect system, the way I've described it, there are a few people in India, very few. I can count them on the fingers of one hand. In America, I'm the only person who teaches this form of yoga, period. That is pure Ashtanga Yoga as found in the Upanishads and done traditionally and authentically. I'm literally the only person who teaches this, and my students, certainly, as well, who I've certified to teach this. But as far as finding some place in one's local city, no, this is too real. This is too real. If a person seriously wants to learn this, then they would have to come to Omaha and study with me.
Thank you for the information there. There's not many teachers around, I do know that, but the only one being you is an interesting state of affairs.
Well, it is interesting. Actually, let me even address that, and not even having to do with me, but just that state of affairs. Exactly how you said it. You actually said it perfectly. This is indeed the state of affairs that we're in. We're in a state of affairs right now such that we have over 7 billion people on the planet, and the Kali Yuga has descended to such depths that if you want to find, without adulteration, pure and true authenticity, it's that difficult. It's literally that difficult. It's not even a matter of, I live in a big city. There must be some place, some person who I can go to get something radically unadulterated. Most likely not. Most likely not. Most likely you're not going to find someone. You may, if you're very lucky, find someone who approximates the form. But as far as the substance, that is almost impossible. Now, this is the thing. Having said that, and this is true not just with yoga, I mean, this is true with everything. Think of any important topic that you can name. This is true for that topic. Now, this is the thing. This, for some people, might be a cause for grief. Like, oh my God, what does this mean? If I want to find a true teacher, they're so rare that it's almost literally impossible. That's terrible. But on the other hand, we have to understand why that is the case. We have to understand that it is the case because, again, things are both worse and better today in 2019 in America, really throughout the world, than we know. Things are both worse and better. Things are worse in that the depths of the Kali Yuga are worse than even many of the people on this server even know. Things are actually worse than you know. Whatever you think you know, you're probably correct about, but it's worse. On the other hand, this is the thing that is wonderful, that despite that, truth is still here. Despite that fact, in seed form, even if only in a few very limited locations, truth still exists. But this is the thing, two things. That truth can only be approached with absolute sincerity. The type of sincerity that is very, very rarely displayed today. The other thing is this. That seed is not only growing, not only going to grow, it's going to explode. So the fact that we are in this sad state of affairs that yes, you want absolute unadulterated truth, it's almost impossible to find, that's not always going to be the case. That is going to change, I can guarantee that. And eventually true yoga will be taught again, everywhere. True Vedanta, true spirituality, true culture. See, we can understand this. We can understand why it's so difficult to find a true yoga guru. Look at the culture. Where is true culture? Where is it? Where is true culture today? It's almost gone, but we see little seed forms here and there. We see little remnants from the past also. Like for myself, whenever I go to visit any city, especially an older city, unbeknownst to anyone who's with me as I'm traveling around the city, my eyes immediately go to those very old buildings that still display true beauty and spirit. So things are still there in seed form, but now we're going to bring them out for the masses, for the world to know. This horrible situation that we're in right now, where to truly grasp truth is almost impossible because true and authentic teachers are almost non-existent, that's going to change. And in fact, that is one of my goals that I've dedicated my life to unto death, is that one of my goals is indeed to create such teachers. One of my goals is that when I leave this planet in 53 years, I will leave behind me 1,000 true and authentic gurus who are liberated beings and who will lead this world to light. So, again, it may seem like a desperate situation right now, but I don't want anyone who's listening to this to be pessimistic as a result. Because this is where we find ourselves. Again, we're in the midst of the very beginning of the golden age. And this is going to change. Some of the people even listening to this right now, you will be among those leaders who will be pure and true, and who will lead this world to re-embrace, to restore what was there in the past that was recently lost. So,
without the modern sense of the word, I always think personally there's infinite reasons to think on the bright side, and there's never a reason to fear or even despair about the modern situation, because as you said, there's the seed that as all of us instinctively feel is there. But I can lead us on to our next question here, which sort of ties into the overall theme. About the last time we talked, you mentioned you could elaborate on the concept of a soulmate or somebody that is specifically meant for you.
Yes, I can. I can talk about that a little bit more. And again, this will require a little bit of metaphysics and ontology in order to fully understand. What this concept is the idea that indeed of all the myriad souls who are out there in the universe, of all the various unlimited Atmans who are out there, that there is an individual who you feel especially close to, who you feel a connection with, a link that is there. And it's something that's intangible. It's something that is beyond merely body. It's something where literally your souls themselves feel as if they are linked. That's where, of course, we get the term soulmate, I would assume. The idea of soulmates, of course, has been discussed endlessly by all sorts of people, from New Age individuals to, people who write about romance and all sorts of silly things. But the concept itself is indeed Vedic. It's something that is indeed found in Vedic spirituality, and thus it is something that is authentic. And let me first of all explain how this even comes about, which is something that no one has ever explained. And when I say no one, I mean no one. Either New Agey or other forms of spirituality or even Vedic teachers. No one has ever explained this, how soulmates even come about. In other words, why is an individual person your soulmate? So let me discuss that. And this is where the metaphysics and ontology come in, because it's a very deep topic. It has to do with our, let's say, pre-fall state. In other words, we all understand that right now we're in the material world. We all understand that we are in various levels of illusion, that we have fallen into this material world, that we're traversing this world, having all of our experiences. But we understand that at one time, before we fell into illusion and into this material world, we had a pre-existence. Well, it originates from that. And let me talk about what that pre-existence is a little bit. And again, this is all from the Vedic scriptures. So essentially, this is the idea that you have the Supreme Being, Krishna, Narayana, Vishnu, and from that central locus of being of God himself comes the emanation of God's effulgence. Prabhupada writes about this. He talks about how there is Krishna, but then there is his effulgence. And that effulgence becomes what is known as the Brahmajyoti. The light of God is literally what Brahmajyoti means. So again, if you can imagine this analogy, that there is the sun, but then there's the sunlight that is coming from God. Similar sort of idea. There is God himself in his primary locus of being, but then there's this energy, this power, this effulgence that comes from God. And within that effulgence are the unlimited numbers of Atmans. And that is where they are first manifest. Now when I say first, of course, we're talking about this being the spiritual realm. None of this is happening within materiality. Thus, when I say where they are first manifest, there is no time in history where they first came into being. That is the individual Atmans. Because we're talking about a realm that's beyond time, beyond space, beyond causality. That's the spiritual realm. But let's say this is where the Atmans originate from, is from Brahmajyoti. So if you can imagine an infinite number of points of light, each one of those being an individual unit of consciousness. That is what we all were at one time before coming into the material world. Now, in their beginning stages, these individual units of consciousness, they have consciousness. But that consciousness, and again, several of our gurus have explained this, it's kind of a general collective sort of consciousness of being itself. But as far as individual awareness, that is individuation, the process of individuation, where I understand that, oh, I am me, I am myself, that Atma Bodhi, it's called, Atma Bodhi. This comes about a little bit later in the development of the Atman. So at first, the Atman just has the most general of awareness. But then it finally comes to the point of being aware of itself as an individual unit, as someone who is a specific individual. Oh, I am me. So that begins. Now, the next stage is an interesting one, and this is extremely important. The next stage is when the Atman is aware not only of itself, but then of that which is not self, of that which is outside of itself. In other words, it becomes aware of others. So, are we following this thus far?
Absolutely, and we've been coincidentally, as you're sure, been talking and reading a lot about this very recently.
Excellent. So, once this individuation of consciousness occurs, and then the Atman after that begins to be aware of, let's say, and this is tricky because we're using very limited human language to talk about something that quite literally is beyond time and space, but we'll do this anyway. Once the Atman becomes aware of that which is outside of itself, that is, that there are others, what happens is, well, what is necessarily the first thing outside of itself that the Atman becomes aware of? Well, it becomes aware of that being who has, of course, closest proximity to it. So this is the very, very first thing that the Atman becomes aware of. It becomes aware of another Atman. And not a multiplicity of Atmans, but one Atman very specifically. The reason why is because, you see, again, what does it mean to even have proximity in a place where there is no space, where there is no geographic location? What does it mean to have proximity to a being where here and there has no meaning? You see, what that proximity is proximity of being, proximity of essence. In other words, you become immediately aware of that being who is most like yourself, closest to your own essence, closest to your, what will become ultimate personality. That is your soulmate. That is your soulmate. It is the individual who you first become aware of, and that person becomes aware of you. So once that happens, you're linked with that person because you are closest together in, again, your essential being and who you are, what you are like within as Atman. So that's the origination of soulmate. But then on top of that, of course, what happens when and or if, because it's not always guaranteed that every Atman will eventually fall into the material world. On the contrary, in fact, 3/4 of Atmans do not. It's only 1/4 of Atmans who actually fall into the material world. But what happens when those two individuals do fall into the material world? Well, this is now where it becomes interesting from our, let's say, more earthly perspective. A few things to be said about this. First of all, the connection between soulmates is not the same for all soulmates. For some people, it is simply the fact that, oh yes, there's someone out there who is very similar to me, who I would love to know and be with, and etc. And yes, this is a wonderful, wonderful thing. I hope that I'll find this person someday. Versus for some individuals, it's like the intensity of a fire. And there are some individuals for who it's not merely that they are quote-unquote soulmates, but they have a connection that is so intense, that is so spiritual, that is so real, that it is almost as if internally they're the same. They're one being. They're not, of course. They're not. They're both individuals. But at the same time, for some soulmates, it is an intensity that could almost burn a planet to ashes. And when those two people finally find each other, it is something astounding. It's something astounding. So now let me just be a little prescient, and I'll ask the next question to myself. Should everyone search for their soulmate? The answer is not necessarily. The answer is it really depends on the person. Again, for some people, simply knowing that there's someone out there who is like them and who they are very connected to, that for some people is enough. And they can kind of go on with their life and just do what they need to. For other people, however, when it's the latter sort of soulmates that I was speaking about, where it's an intensity that is unimaginable, yes, they have to search for that person. Yeah, they need to search for that person, and you can believe that person is searching for you as well. That person is searching for you whether you know it or not. And you'll eventually meet. And when you meet, neither of you will be the same after that. Both of you will have a fulfillment that is inconceivable. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it absolutely does. We were eagerly awaiting the explanation since last time.
Since that little teaser.
Yes, right at the end.
what I wanted to do is tell everyone this golden age that we talk about so much, these changes that we want to bring about, that we've talked about, and which we can continue to talk about endlessly and should, because there's much more detail that people have to know as far as what is coming and what we need to do to make it something truly wonderful. We need to bring about this golden age practically. We need to do it through action, and we need to do it now. We need to do it today. And what I would like to do personally, and this is a personal appeal, is I know that everyone who is here is on the same page as I am. We know what we want to bring about, and I want to appeal to you to help me bring this about, because my existence is devoted to this, bringing about this golden age. People here are all individuals. Some people, I'm sure, have been, to use a nice modernism, which I like actually, because I like the Matrix movie, the first one. Some of us have been red-pilled for a very short amount of time, maybe a year. Some of us have been red-pilled for, who knows, 10 years, 20 years. We've all come to our awareness and our understanding of our place in this world in different ways for different durations of time. For myself, I was born red-pilled. Quite literally. I was born red-pilled, and I was born always knowing what was the nature of this world and what needed to be done. That knowledge grew over time thanks to my gurus and their mercy upon me. But I want to make this appeal that you please help me to get this message out as much as possible. We need to wake people up. That is our number one goal today. There is nothing, there is no task, there is no project, there is no event, there is quite literally no activity that we can do in this world that is more important than this one thing. And that is, our people are sleeping. We need to wake them up. We need to wake them up. We need to give them information. We need to give them knowledge. We need to heal them. We need to take our people in our arms and heal them. We need to take them in our arms and embrace them and give them love. The love that they've been missing for so long. We need to give them wisdom. We need to give them knowledge. We need to see them as beautiful plants, beautiful flowers that have gotten no nutrition, no water, no sunshine for however long, and they're withering, they're dying, and we need to be that sunshine for them. We need to give them water. We need to give them sustenance. We need to feed them. And what that means is indeed waking them up, giving them the knowledge, the information, the wisdom that many of us here have begun to accumulate, and which has changed our lives for the better. And for many of us has brought us from almost dead to life. We now need to do this for our people, and not 10 people, not 50, not 100. We need to do this for hundreds of thousands and millions of our people throughout the world, throughout America and Europe specifically. And the totality of my being is dedicated to this. Quite literally, every single breath I take, every thought I have, from the moment that I wake up and I open my eyes in the morning until the time that I go to sleep and finally close my eyes every evening. And even as I'm asleep, very often my dreams are filled with thoughts of how to wake our people up. And we need to work together now and make this something that's real. So again, please help me to do this. Help me to bring this message to millions of people. For myself, now that I've done this 6-month sabbatical and feel empowered like never in my entire life, I wish to dedicate myself even more so than I have in the past to waking our people up. So let's work together. Let's work together. Let's work very closely to do this.
We definitely, going off what you said last time of how we need, more keyboard warriors and more people in the positive way, obviously, and more people that are compassionate and seeking to wake people up with authenticity and sincerity rather than through their opposites. It's a very big task, but it's one that has to be done. And I know I will try as hard as I can, and I know a lot of others are trying on a day-to-day basis.
Wonderful. Very good. We will discuss this more in the future. And again, this is the main thing. Get the word out. So you've seen on our YouTube channel, Dharma Nation, we have about 100 videos. And at this point, we're going to have many hundreds and hundreds more. We'll be putting out a video a week from now on. Spread them. These are videos that I personally have chosen these talks in order to be videos, and then Tulsi edited them perfectly and beautifully. I chose these videos for a reason. You'll see that they're on different topics. Discussing different topics meant to awaken people in different sorts of ways, and there are going to be many hundreds more coming. Please spread the links to these videos as much as possible. Please share them, please spread them on everywhere. If you have your own YouTube channels, spread them on Facebook, on Twitter, on every and all social media that you have, Gab, BitChute, all of these various things. These videos have woken up so many people that it always astounds me. And I'm only aware of the tip of the iceberg. I'm aware of 1% of how many people have been affected by these videos. Please help to spread them. Please help to spread the books that are out there, especially the Dharma Manifesto, the Sanatana Dharma book, Sanatana Dharma, The Eternal Natural Way, Living Dharma. These books also, and there are going to be many, many books coming in the future. I've told people that before my life is over, I have 198 more books within me, ready to come out. So in the next 53 years, those books will come out. So again, any help that you can give would be truly wonderful.
I feel like it's only fair because you've given us and myself a lot, personally, so much help with the pure distilled format of the. I can't tell you how many times certain specific videos of yours have come in unbelievably handy in helping to explain to people certain concepts and ideas and certain problems they've been having that you have a perfect answer and explanation for already out there.
Thank you. There's more ammunition coming. Just to let you know.
We're definitely looking forward to it. But with that, I don't want to keep you any longer than you've already allotted us this time. It's a very, very kind of you to do so. I definitely would like to make it a more frequent thing with your indulgence.
Absolutely, definitely. I am here to serve you, truly. So thank you so much again for organizing this. And again, we'll speak again maybe in about a month or so.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll definitely be in touch.
All right, take care. Namaste. Jai Bhagavan Shri Krishna, Jai Shriman Narayana. Please take care.
Dude.